My name is Latasha Duda. I'm 31 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought betrayal meant cheating, lying, or hiding messages from someone. I didn't know betrayal could sound like one casual text while I was 4 states away working. Hey babe, don't freak out, but I sold some of your camera stuff to cover my visa payment. You never even use half of it anyway. I'm a freelance commercial photographer, not a weekend hobbyist with a starter camera taking sunset portraits in the park. I shoot product campaigns, corporate headshots, small budget ads, and branding packages for companies that expect everything perfect. It took me 6 years to build that business, and nearly every dollar I made went back into the gear that made it possible. By the time this happened, my main setup was worth around $38,000. 2 professional camera bodies, premium lenses, studio lighting rigs, modifiers, triggers, high-end memory cards, backup storage, and a calibrated monitor I used for editing. Everything lived in 3 Pelican cases inside the closet of my second bedroom, which I used as my office. That equipment wasn't decoration. It was my income, my independence, my proof that I had built something from nothing. My boyfriend, Grant Mercer, had been with me for about a year and a half. He moved into my apartment around month 9. The lease was mine. The furniture was mine. The deposit was mine. He paid $600 a month toward rent, which felt fair because the total was $1,450 and he was moving into a place already furnished. Grant worked in retail management and made decent money, around $44,000 a year, but he spent like the future was a rumor. Designer sneakers, watches, cologne, subscription boxes, expensive takeout, impulse purchases that arrived at the door in neat little packages while his credit cards quietly drowned. I noticed the debt early. 3 cards, rotating balances, late fees, minimum payments. Once, gently, I suggested a budget spreadsheet. He looked at me like I'd slapped him. My finances are my business, Latasha. So I backed off. His money, his problem. That philosophy worked beautifully until his problem became my police report. 2 months ago, I left for a 4-day corporate shoot out of state. It was a skincare campaign, a good contract, the kind freelancers pray for because it keeps the lights on for another season. I packed my travel kit, 1 camera body, 2 lenses, portable lights. The rest stayed home in the Pelican cases, like always. On day 2, I was reviewing product shots in a hotel conference room when my phone buzzed. Grant's text appeared, casual as milk on a grocery list. He had sold some of my camera stuff to cover his visa bill. I stared at the screen so long, my assistant asked if I was okay. I walked out, went straight into the hotel bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and called him. He answered, breezy, "Babe, relax. I knew you'd overreact." I asked exactly what he sold. He sighed, annoyed. "The big cases in the closet, the cameras, the big lenses, those light things. I don't know what they're called." My stomach dropped so hard I grabbed the sink. That wasn't spare gear. That was my studio setup. My backup bodies, 3 of my best lenses, my lighting rig, my monitor. I asked who bought it. "Some guy online," he said. "I posted it the day you left. He picked it up the next morning." The day I left. That detail sliced through every excuse he might have made. This wasn't panic. This was timing. I asked how much he got. A pause. Then, $4,200. $38,000 of professional equipment sold for $4,200 because he needed to make a credit card payment. I didn't scream. My voice went flat in a way that scared even me. "Send me the buyer's name, number, listing, and every message. Screenshot everything. Do not delete anything." He started backpedaling. "It's just stuff. We can replace it." I said, "You don't have $38,000. He snapped, "You're being really aggressive right now." I hung up. 20 minutes later, the screenshots came in. The listing title nearly made me sick. Professional Camera Equipment Bundle, barely used, need gone, ASAP. He had listed my livelihood like clutter before a move. The buyer had jumped fast, probably knowing the deal was too good to be clean. For the next 48 hours, I finished that shoot on autopilot. I smiled at clients, adjusted lighting, checked shadows on moisturizer bottles while my hands kept shaking. First, I called my insurance company. I had professional equipment coverage. The representative listened carefully and told me that because the gear had been taken and sold by someone without my consent, it would be treated as theft. She strongly recommended I file a police report. Then I contacted the buyer through the marketplace. I explained calmly that the equipment was stolen property, sold without the owner's permission, and I was prepared to involve police. I offered to buy it back for exactly what he paid if he cooperated. He agreed. "Honestly," he said, "I figured something was wrong. Nobody sells that setup for $4,000. Then I called the non-emergency police line in my city. The officer asked for the value. When I said $38,000, he went quiet. Then he told me theft between $25,000 and $50,000 was a Class C felony in my state, potentially up to 10 years, though likely less for a first offense. I didn't feel powerful hearing that. I felt cold, sick. But every time guilt tried to rise, I pictured Grant letting a stranger into my apartment while I was gone, carrying away the tools I'd spent 6 years buying piece by piece. I finished the shoot, drove home, and went straight to the buyer's place. The Pelican cases were still there, untouched. Every body, every lens, every light. I checked everything, handed him $4,200 cash, and thanked him for cooperating. Then I drove home. But they didn't move me. Not anymore. "You're choosing stuff over us," he whispered. I looked past him at the hallway leading to my office, where the empty space in the closet still felt like a crime scene. "No," I said. "You already chose. I'm just naming it." The next morning, I filed the police report. I brought everything with me. Purchase receipts for every camera body and lens, insurance documents, screenshots of Grant's marketplace listing, the messages between him and the buyer, the text where he casually admitted selling my equipment, even the serial numbers. The officer taking the report paused halfway through typing when he saw the total value. "She sold..." He stopped himself and corrected. "Sorry. He sold $38,000 of equipment for $4,200? Yes." He leaned back in his chair slowly and just shook his head, like his brain couldn't quite process that level of stupidity. A detective contacted me within 2 days. Professional, calm, thorough. He asked whether Grant had any ownership claim to the equipment, any shared purchases, any authorization to sell my belongings. I answered no to every question. The detective said the case was unusually straightforward because Grant had essentially handed them a confession through text message. I wished that had been the part that exhausted me most. It wasn't. The real nightmare started when Grant refused to leave. I had given him until the end of the week to move out. Friday came. I opened the apartment door after spending the afternoon editing at a coffee shop, and there he was on my couch, eating takeout sushi while Netflix played on my television like nothing had happened. For a second, I genuinely thought I'd walked into the wrong apartment. "What are you doing?" I asked. He didn't even look guilty anymore, just irritated. "I talked to my mom," he said. "You can't legally kick me out. I have tenant rights." And the worst part? He was technically correct. Even though he wasn't on the lease, he'd lived there long enough to establish residency. I couldn't just throw his things outside or change the locks. I spent that entire night researching eviction law instead of sleeping. The next morning, I handed him a formal 30-day notice to vacate. Printed. Signed. Dated. He actually laughed. "You're serving me papers now?" he asked. "What are you, a lawyer?" Then he took a picture of the notice and sent it to his group chat while I stood there. I could hear his phone exploding with notifications for the next hour. Something changed in him after that. The fake remorse disappeared completely. It was like the second he realized I wasn't backing down, his entire personality recalibrated into pure entitlement. He started eating my food intentionally. Not shared groceries, mine. I meal prepped every Sunday because shoots kept me busy all week. Suddenly, entire containers disappeared from the fridge overnight. When I confronted him, he shrugged. "I'm under financial stress because of your police report," he said. "The least you could do is feed me." I stared at him so long, he actually looked uncomfortable for a second. Then came his mother. I came home one afternoon and found her sitting at my kitchen counter, waiting for me, with her purse folded neatly in her lap like she was preparing for a business negotiation. Grant sat beside her, smirking slightly, arms crossed. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about fixing anything anymore. They thought they could pressure me into surrendering. His mother launched straight into a speech before I even put my bag down. "You are ruining a young man's future over replaceable objects."
Replaceable objects.
$38,000 of equipment I'd spent 6 years building one contract at a time, reduced to objects. I stayed calm. "The equipment was recovered," I said. "The issue is the theft." She waved her hand dismissively. "It's not theft if you're in a relationship. Couples share resources." I actually laughed once under my breath because the confidence in her voice was unbelievable. "That's not how the law works." Her expression hardened immediately. "You're being vindictive." Then she pulled out her grand solution. A personal check. $4,200. The exact amount Grant got from selling my equipment. "If you drop the charges," she said carefully, sliding the check across my counter, "we can all move on from this misunderstanding."
Misunderstanding.
Like he accidentally borrowed a sweater instead of orchestrating the sale of my career tools while I was out of state. I didn't even touch the check. "The report has already been filed," I explained. "This is a felony investigation now. I don't control whether charges move forward." She blinked at me like I was lying. "Yes, you do." "No, I really don't." She genuinely believed criminal cases worked like customer service complaints, that I could simply reverse everything because she'd shown up with a checkbook and enough confidence. When I refused again, her entire demeanor shifted cold. "You know," she said slowly, "if you hadn't left your expensive things lying around where Grant could access them, none of this would have happened." I remember staring at her, wondering whether she heard herself. My things. Inside my apartment. In my office closet. The conversation ended after that because there was nowhere left for logic to go. 12 days after the report was filed, the detective called Grant in for questioning. I wasn't there, obviously, but afterward the detective updated me briefly. He explained the felony classification, potential prison exposure, permanent criminal record implications. Apparently, Grant became emotional very quickly once he realized this wasn't just an argument between partners anymore. That night, his mother called me again. Different tone this time. No arrogance, no lectures.
Pleading.
"He made a mistake," she said quietly. "A felony will follow him forever." For a moment, hearing her cry almost cracked something in me. Almost. Then I remembered Grant standing in my office while strangers carried out the equipment I used to survive. I remembered him texting me like it was no big deal. I remembered him laughing at the eviction notice. And the softness disappeared again. "I can't help you," I said. 3 days later, he retaliated. I got served paperwork at my apartment door. Grant had filed for a temporary protective order against me. Claim: emotional abuse and coercive control. According to his filing, I was weaponizing the legal system to intimidate him through the police report and eviction process. I actually felt dizzy reading it. This is the part nobody talks about. Even false accusations feel terrifying because the system has to take them seriously at first. The emergency order itself was denied almost immediately because there were no allegations of violence or physical threats. But the hearing was still scheduled 2 weeks later. I hired a lawyer that same afternoon. $3,500 retainer just to begin. When I handed him the stack of evidence, he reviewed it quietly for about 20 minutes before looking up at me. "This will get dismissed," he said, "but you absolutely need representation." So suddenly I was spending thousands of dollars defending myself because the man who stole from me decided accusing me was easier than admitting guilt. That realization made something inside me finally harden completely. The detective later told me privately that the protective order filing didn't help Grant's situation at all because it looked retaliatory. The timeline was awful for him. Theft report. Detective interview. Then sudden abuse allegations. It practically explained itself. Still, I barely slept for the next 2 weeks. Every sound in the apartment irritated me. Every time Grant walked through the living room like he belonged there, my chest tightened. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me with this simmering resentment in his eyes, like somehow I had destroyed his life. Not him. Me. One night, I walked into the kitchen and found him drinking from one of my coffee mugs like nothing had happened. And suddenly, I had this horrible realization. The man I loved was gone long before the police report. Maybe he had never existed at all. The protective order hearing happened first. My attorney arrived carrying a file so thick it looked like a trial exhibit. Every text, every receipt, the marketplace listing, the buyer's statement, the police report, my lease, insurance records, even the payment Grant's mother tried sending me afterward, labeled full restitution for misunderstanding. Grant wouldn't look at me inside the courtroom. Neither would his mother. His attorney argued that I was using legal pressure to control and intimidate him after the breakup. Then my lawyer laid out the actual timeline. Grant sold my equipment while I was out of town, admitted it through text, got investigated for felony theft, then suddenly filed abuse claims after learning charges were likely. The judge listened quietly for nearly 20 minutes. Then he dismissed the protective order completely. Not denied. Dismissed. Before ending the hearing, he said something I still remember word for word. The court takes protective orders extremely seriously. Using them as retaliation during legitimate criminal proceedings undermines the system for people who truly need protection. Grant's face went pale. A week later, the DA officially filed felony theft charges. His public defender negotiated a plea deal before trial. The evidence was overwhelming. The texts alone destroyed any defense he could have attempted. In the end, Grant pleaded guilty to a reduced Class D felony. He received 3 years probation, community service, restitution payments, and a felony record that would follow him for years. His mother sent me one last message after sentencing. I hope this was worth ruining his future. I never answered. Because the truth was simple. I didn't ruin his future. Grant did that himself the moment he let a stranger walk into my apartment and carry out the equipment I spent 6 years building. At any point, he could have stopped escalating. He could have admitted what he did, taken responsibility, shown actual remorse. Instead, he chose excuses, manipulation, threats, retaliation. The 30-day notice eventually expired during the criminal process. Grant moved out on day 28. His mother helped him load a rented van while I stayed inside my office pretending to edit photos so I wouldn't have to watch. When they finally left, he placed the apartment key on the kitchen counter without saying goodbye. That silence honestly hurt more than yelling would have. I changed the locks that same evening. Then I sat alone in my apartment with all my equipment finally back where it belonged. The place felt strangely hollow afterward. Quieter. Colder. But safe. A few weeks later, I deleted our old photos off my phone while sitting on the couch eating takeout. No dramatic breakdown, no tears, just 4 minutes of pressing delete over and over until he disappeared from my storage completely. Sometimes people ask whether I feel guilty about the felony. Honestly, only until I remember the text. You never use half of it anyway. Every single time I think about forgiving him, I picture strangers carrying my livelihood out of my apartment while I was away, trusting the man I loved. And then the guilt disappears again.